So here we are at the beginning of November, which means we've already had daylight savings time and fallen back an hour. Most of us have kicked the jack-o'-lanterns to the curb, and without the mitigating influence of American Thanksgiving, there are many here in Canada that think it's perfectly acceptable to start thinking about Christmas. They are wrong. It's been a great month of reading, so let's get started. So we start with Under Major Domo Minor by Patrick DeWitt. And this is a modern take on the traditional fairy tale, where we have an unassuming young boy from a modest village setting out to find his own adventure and ends up in a moldering old castle. It features eccentrics, madmen, pickpockets, a big giant hole, and an errant salami. There's a lot of stuff going on in this story, but nothing really happens. I think Patrick DeWitt does a better job with his earlier work, The Sisters Brothers, which is his take on the Western story. And I've always thought of it as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in the Old West. But in the meantime, Under Major Domo Minor, 3 stars. The Investigation by Jung Myung Lee, translated from the Korean. And this is set in a Japanese prison during World War II. It's an investigation that's set off when a brutal guard, otherwise known as the Butcher, is found murdered with his lips sewn shut. And it follows traditional investigative thriller tropes with red herrings and plot twists and intricate conspiracies. But then it veers off and it actually becomes a fictional recount of a real-life Korean poet, Yoon Dong-ju, who died in a Japanese prison. And it talks about the power of music, poetry, and literature, not to mention a bit of Korean kite-flying. Now, Korean kite-flying is a lot different from the kite-flying that you and I probably remember, where you ran off to the corner store and got that flimsy plastic kite that you would sort of send up into the air at some park. In Korea, my dad used to build his own kites and actually would lace the kite string with broken bits of glass so that in competing and fighting with other kites, you could sever the strings of them and collect the fallen kites as your prize. It was almost like this kite flying Fast and Furious. Despite the fact it was unevenly written at spots, still a great read. 4 stars. 3 Day Road by Joseph Boyden. I have an earlier review of the book over here. It was another emphatic 5 out of 5 stars. You should also check out his later work called The Orenda, which also I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Joseph Boyden is absolutely killing it. And as far as I'm concerned, is batting 1,000. These are both fantastic books that I can't recommend enough. Tung by Kyung-rang Jo, translated from the Korean. This is actually a good accompaniment to The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which has been getting some attention lately after its glowing review in Publishers Weekly recently. Here in the story, we have a young chef who is picking up the pieces of her life after a breakup with her boyfriend. She returns to the Italian restaurant that she once worked at. And this is a bit of a foodie bonanza here, but throughout there's not a single mention of Korean food. There's nary a whiff of kimchi anywhere in the story, which is a little odd. I have to say, along with The Vegetarian, it really paints this odd relationship that Koreans clearly have with food and sex. I keep thinking about our little section of BookTube and how it's dwarfed in South Korea by something called mukbang, which is basically live streaming of Koreans eating food. People are participating and watching and commenting as they eat copious amounts of food. Bizarre, but a very huge part of Korean culture. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. Microhistory Achievement Unlocked. This is part of the Read Harder Challenge. And I'm glad I actually got to this book after the recommendations of so many different people. This is a great accompaniment to Atul Gawande's Being Mortal. Caitlin takes us behind the curtain of the huge industrial funeral complex. In North America, we've not only removed ourselves from the idea of death, but we're furiously working to avoid any mention or acknowledgement of it whatsoever. This is a great book, 4 stars. The Best Laid Plans by Terry Fallis. This adds to my growing list of books signed by the author. Terry Fallis was here in town for a book reading, promoting his latest book, Poles Apart. I got a chance to meet and talk with him and get him to sign my copy of Best Laid Plans, and it seemed like the perfect read considering we were leading into the Canadian elections, here in the land of poutine, toques, two-fours, Mickeys, Smarties, and ketchup chips. This seems like a nice, light, warm, entirely 100% Canadian read. 4 stars. Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. This is one of Joe Hill's earlier works, and he certainly wears his influences on his sleeve. And you could do worse than Stephen King, who happens to be his father. It has all the earmarks of an early Stephen King story, sort of written by a Gen Xer. Judas Coyne is an ex-goth rocker who purchases an American Gothic-type suit that is inhabited by the ghost of someone seeking revenge on Judas Coyne himself. There's lots of great flourishes throughout, but it does read like an early, unpublished Stephen King story. with muscle cars and monster trucks, the American highway, and all these sort of wonderful character sketches. But halfway through reading it, you know exactly what type of book it is. You know exactly how the story is going to end. So there's very little surprises, despite some of the horror flourishes throughout. Do yourself a favor, though. Joe Hill is actually the master of the form. With Nosferatu, it is absolutely fantastic, and we lead into Christmas. It seems like the perfect read. And if you do get a chance, his Lock and Key comic series is also fantastic. And finally, The Descent by Jeff Long, inspired by the Halloween season. And it starts off truly harrowing. This seems like it's going to be a truly terrifying book with the first 100 pages. But then it veers off and becomes all the books. It's got this elements of Dan Brown and a secret cabal and a revisionist idea of history. There is Michael Crichton-esque eco-terror thrown in, elements of sci-fi, and a love story. This could have been a truly horrifying, scary book, but it tries to do too many things all at once, and it becomes unnecessarily long, and it's not as tight as I would have liked it to be. I still enjoyed it quite a bit, though, but 3 stars. So that's it for October. As we get near the end of the year, shit starts getting real for us readers. We've got the results of many literary prizes now, and editors are starting to solicit best of lists for books. So that means we've got some great reads lined up or laid out for us in the near future. So get ready, winter's coming.